another episode of And Security for All. As a reminder, we have two outlets of listeners out there. Our LinkedIn Live listeners, if you're here today, welcome to the show. And we have our Voice America listeners that tune in every Friday. And if you want to check out any of our past episodes, you can find us on any place that you listen to your favorite podcast. Just look for And Security for All, and you can catch any of our past speakers. And we would love for you guys to go check that out. Thank you again for all of our loyal listeners, and welcome to another episode. I hope everyone's January is starting out great. Mine has been a little crazy. We have are already rocking and rolling with our events. For any of you guys out there that don't know, I'm also the CEO of FutureCon Events. We host cybersecurity conferences all over North America. And we just finished up last week our first show, and we were out in Dallas, Texas. And the Texans, actually, they know how to do it pretty well out there. We were at the House of Blues, and we had a ton of fun out there. It was a packed house. We wrapped up the event with some live music at the House of Blues, and it was a great kickoff for all of our events for 2023. Tomorrow, we're heading out to Los Angeles, and we have an event this week on Thursday, and Sajid, the CISO from 7-Eleven, is going to be our keynote speaker. So if anyone's tuning in today, if you want to check us out in Los Angeles, we would love to have you guys drop by. Just give me a ping, and love to see you all out there. Again, my keynote, not my keynote speaker, but one of our keynote speakers that we had out in Atlanta, which we had another great event that wrapped up 2022, was Ken Foster. He's the VP of IT Governance, Risk, and Compliance from Fleet Corp. He is going to be my guest today, and I'm excited to have him here. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Hey, Kim. Good to see you again. Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Always look forward to having a conversation with you.
Yeah, how's it going? How's your year starting off?
It's been hectic so far. It's as you wind down the previous year and then kicking off anything that in the new year, that doesn't seem to be much spare time for anything else, and it's definitely been an exciting kickoff to the new year so far. So,
Well, did you have any time to rest during the holidays?
I took a day here, a day there. Little just kept it low key this year. Stuck around the house. Got to watch the dogs go out and win a championship. So that was kind of part of my new end of the year there. So I did
Oh
spend some
yeah,
time doing
yeah.
that. So yeah, uh,
Yeah,
but
I actually had a friend of mine. I think it went viral. He's a friend of mine that lives down in Cabo that was out in Los Angeles watching that game, and he saw Nick Saban, and he called him down. And Nick Saban came down from the stand to talk to my friend, and he goes, "Can you give me a go, dogs?" And he goes, "I'm not going to do that," and he walked away and went back up to the stands.
I
But yeah,
missed that. I'll have to see if I can find that one.
yeah,
So
I'll
yeah,
send it to you. It's really
yeah.
funny. So, but anyway, so that was fun. And now, are you a NFL?
I uh, I try to watch it every now and then, but there's nothing really going on in the current playoff situation that I'm all that excited about.
Okay, well, I
So,
am. I'm from Missouri, and I'm a big Chiefs fan, but a little nervous for the Chiefs. Those Bengals. Those
I was gonna
Bengals.
say, yeah, it looks like it's gonna be a repeat of last year, so it should be a good game. So
Well, so when you were in Atlanta, which was an amazing event. So it was kind of nice ending with Atlanta, and then kicking it back up. Do you happen to know Pat Benet?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Pat Benet was our keynote speaker out in Dallas, and it was so nice to end with such a strong speaker like you and a great panel, and then wrapping it up. We did something a little different in Dallas. Had two authors, Philip Wiley and George Finney. They were there with their books, and we had fun. But it was nice to end the year on a high note and start it off with a high note. So
Yeah.
when you were out, and well, before we even jump into that, because I know you made a big move about a year ago, because you used to be with, was it Global Payments? What
I
was
was
it?
with Fiserv. Yeah.
Yeah, I always feel
Yeah.
like they're like the same. I feel like everyone
Yeah.
in Atlanta is
It's
either
the
with one or the
it,
other.
it's the other Ken in Atlanta that moved to Global Payments.
Oh,
That used to work with me over at Fiserv. He went to Global Payments. I went to FleetCor, right? And sometimes that did confuse people when I told everybody when he worked with the other guy named Ken worked for me. I was like, that was my move. I said that way he got invited to meetings, and then would go, I think this was supposed to be for you. And I was like, you got it. You can take it.
so did he take your job at?
No,
Oh no,
no,
no, because he went to
yeah,
Global Payments.
yeah, he
Okay.
does. He's more of a data guy, but as we talk about things and things I like to talk about in the cybersecurity world, right? When you were looking at risk quantification and how we measure our programs, I think bringing on somebody who understands how to help do the data side of that and the number crunching and help you build out the metrics and get them into the format you want them to be. Uh, that's I think as security folks are brilliant people and they do a great job, but when you need a specialist, you go out and find a specialist. So,
Well, what, and I have a quick comment. Robert Yellum is out there, and I guess I should make some clarification. We're on LinkedIn Live, but this episode records Friday. I was trying to keep it. I messed that up when I started talking about our Los Angeles event. So I don't want
yeah.
to confuse our listeners on Friday. If you all are tuning in, I want to let you know that we pre-recorded this the Tuesday before, when you're listening to it now. So our Los Angeles event will be over, but Robert Yellum is out there, and he said, I'd like to get info on the Los Angeles event. Hey, you should come out, Robert. All you have to do is go to FutureCon events, and I'll just give you a code. Just use LinkedIn. We have a bunch of Northrop Grumman people already attending. So just reach out to me, DM me, and I'll make sure you get a ticket. But tell us a little bit, Ken, about FleetCor, because I don't really know a lot. About FleetCor? What do they do?
We're fintech that kind of specializes in the fuel card transaction space. That's about probably about 50%, maybe a little bit more of our business. We also do a lot of cross-border payments, so we've got a pretty good healthy stake in the cross-border payments area. And then probably a couple of things that people don't really know about FleetCor is that we do quite a bit of work in. We've got some travel, lodging type business that's around kind of corporate fleet type. It's also tied into the kind of the fleet side of things, fleet management side. But we kind of provide some systems for people to be able to book travel and things for their drivers or such when they're out. And then we own the toll system in Brazil, which is you think toll system, but the truth is it's a contactless payment system that allows people to down in Brazil. They even have special lines at fast food restaurants, so you can pull up and buy your dinner with your toll device on your car. So it's kind of an interesting business to be in. Basically, I think what we like to say is we want to be all things payments outside payroll to the small and medium sized business. So that's kind of where our focus in. So that's where we fit in the financial market. We're global. We're operating in about 112 to 115 countries. We have presence in about uh, uh, 10 or 12 now. I think we do acquire quite a bit of companies, so it's a little hard to keep up with that sometimes on where new offices are and things like that. But most of our major operations are for sure in North America, EMEA, and Brazil, or where our big operations are.
So tell it, and then how did you? I know you were you in the Navy?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so tell us about that because I know that's something you and I have in common.
Yeah.
What did you do in the Navy, and then how'd you transition into being the VP of IT governance at Fleet Corps?
So, my journey is probably, well, I will say that my journey's been, I think it was somewhat typical for some of us back when we first kind of got started in cyber in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? I spent 10 years in the Navy. I worked on missile radar systems as what was called a fire controlman. Um, you know, so my exposure was, a lot of electronic engineering, but we also had mainframes basically that ran, Unix-based mainframes that ran those radar systems. And back in the early '90s when I was working on those radar systems and doing all that, the internet in its infancy and kind of computer gaming actually in its infancy, and I took an interest in building computer systems, personal computers, and group of guys that I worked with in the Navy, we all decided to teach ourselves how to build servers and then how to build networks and how to build PCs. And we, took it upon ourselves with getting permission from the command and said, "Hey, we want to build a network," because the ship didn't have a traditional computer network as what we think of it today. So we built a network, and we built a server, and we built an email server and file server, and kind of started doing all that so we could be a little more efficient in our jobs from, end to end of a ship. And then we figured that out, and then we're like, oh well, this is pretty cool. And then we brought our own personal PCs on board for when we had a little downtime while we were deployed out on the ocean. And we'd build computers and play video games against each other. So some of the first person multiplayer games out there, which then taught it we were teaching ourselves how to tune the network and tune the PCs to keep the performance going. And it just something that I had a great interest in and had an aptitude for, I guess. So, and as we were doing that, in this back in those days, we didn't call it cybersecurity; we called it information assurance. And the command had a website, and pretty rudimentary stuff back then, but they also, and the documents and stuff, and they needed somebody to make sure that we were protecting the stuff that was on there as best we could. So I became I became blessed as the command's information assurance officer. No formal training in it. They're just like, you seem to know what you're doing with this stuff. And I was senior enough and been around a while that they blessed me with the title, which got me interested in that. So then that led me to leaving the military and taking my first job in Atlanta, working for a small company. It had a few locations around the U.S. and started out kind of working in more on the engineering side of that, but then very quickly in about a year, I was running all of their. I ran IT for them after about a year. And that included everything, right? If it plugged into the network, it belonged to me. And security in its infancy back then, we had firewalls and antivirus and maybe a little bit of rudimentary encryption, but that really was kind of it, right? And that just evolved over time as I moved and my career evolved. I did some pen testing for a while, working for the government. I did some hardening for a while for the government, doing that kind of things. Did forensics and collections for the government in a different point in my life, and I did a lot of infrastructure too. I ran infrastructure for companies and was, doing networking and SQL servers and building servers and stuff. Kind of done it all, right? Outside of pure development. And like I've told everybody, I can sit down and write scripts and do this stuff, but you're probably not the guy you want to hire to do that, because I am definitely slow at it. But that just kind of led me down the road, and then I went back to work for the government in Afghanistan for a few years, kind of in the intelligence community, doing some stuff around computer forensics and some application support, and just I ran the team over there, and did that for a couple of years, decided it was time to come back home and, come back to Atlanta. And I took a role with a company in Atlanta. It was kind of I call it that, about the same number of people wise, about the same as what we are here, about 14,000 people. Um, we had about 500 locations in the U.S. We were U.S. based, and I ran all of IT operations and engineering, and became their CISO within my first year of being there, and really started trying to build the programs and do that. And after running both sides of the house for that size company, I realized that uh, I think for my health and stress level, and this is going to sound funny, but I think I was just going to focus on security and not worry about the infrastructure side of it. So that led me into more of a pure security role, and I took another CISO role, small infrastructure as a service company, and was there for a short period of time, and then wound up going over the First Data to kind of run a governance and risk, and also head up their federal government security stuff that they did for federal government. And what I saw was a path that, if you want to be well versed and I think really guide what a company is trying to do and be strategic about it, you have to be thinking about it from a risk standpoint and thinking about how to govern the program. And I want to say it's more than just what most people would think is a pure, when I say governance, right? I'm not talking about just assessments and audits and regulatory. I'm talking about truly governed programs. And when you think about it, that's when you're reporting up to the board and communicating up through the business. The board's job is to govern the company, right, from a financial standpoint. Our job is to govern the cybersecurity program and communicate the risk that we are having from cybersecurity and how that affects the financial part of the company. And if you're working from the risk angle and thinking about that, that helps you translate into true business conversation, which is risk, right? Having the conversation in business risk and having it in their language, not the technical jargon that is good information. We absolutely have to have it, but you have to convert that at some point into an actual business risk and quantify that risk in revenue dollars. And have that conversation. So that's what got me into the risk side of the house. So I've been doing that now for coming up on 5.5, almost 6 years. So it's
Your
it's been
story's
interesting
so
here.
yeah, your story's so amazing. So before you went in the Navy, did you go in as an officer or enlisted?
No, I was an enlisted guy.
Wow, that's officer. That's
The
officer. That's awesome.
The
You know.
funny story about that is I actually joined the Army first. I joined the Army when I was 16 as on the delayed entry program, and one day I have a lot of family that are veterans too, and matter of fact, I think I have somebody who's been in every branch except the Coast Guard, and we were talking about it one day, and I had an uncle who was in the Army and uncle in the Air Force at the same time. They go, "Hey, did the Army guarantee you what you were going to be doing in your contract from the recruiter?" And I was like, "No." They told me, we'll get you in, then you'll get assigned a job coming out of basic. And they're like, "Yeah, you probably you don't want to do that in the Navy." So I went and talked to a Navy recruiter, and he's like, "Yeah, we can write down. We'll put the job you're going to be doing in a contract." So I actually backed out of my Army commitment and went into the Navy because they could offer me the job that I wanted to be doing in the contract. So
Well, when you were in the Navy and you signed that contract, because when I went in the Navy, I went in at 18. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Definitely was not a college person. I did that later in life, but that just wasn't for me. So they didn't at the time. Um, uh, I guess I wasn't a good tester. So when I was testing, I'm not ashamed to say it because I'm here. I am today, and life's about ups and downs. And so I went in unassigned, and I ended up working on the flight deck on an airbase in Hawaii. So that was all cool.
There could be
But
worse places to be working
yeah,
on the
and I
flight deck,
loved
right?
it because it was physical, which is but I was the only female out there. But when you went in, so what I was doing at 18 in the military and what I'm doing now are two different things. It did kind of progress because I ended up going in the military police, and then I was on a nuclear base and I was on the SWAT team. So I kind of feel like security. I still was in those security aspect, but not like I wasn't on, because back then, I mean, they
Yeah,
were, yeah.
it was it was main. I mean, I have personally loaded a program in a computer radar off of punch cards, off
Mhm.
of magnetic tape, and I've even done it with binary switches, flipping them to ones and zeros to program a radar. The military was infamous, I guess, for not being on the latest and greatest technology, even in those days, right? So, it's funny. I've still technically never finished my college education because I wasn't very. It's one of those things. By the time I graduated school, I was done with school. I wasn't really excited about going on to college, and I tried it at night for a little bit and decided that wasn't for me. Uh, Went into the military, and apparently I did test fairly well for that because they tried to get me to be a nuclear engineer, and the first thing they did though was hand me a 3-hour math test, basically a math and physics test, and I was like, I don't really want to do this, and they said you should do it. It's great for your career, and you got 3.5 hours to take this test, and I think I finished it. It took me about 45 minutes to fill it out and just basically randomize my bubbles that I filled out and guess at questions. I didn't even try, and I actually only missed it by 3 points doing that. So I narrowly escaped being a nuclear engineer, and they said, "Hey, what about being a fire controlman?" And I was like, "I don't want to put fires out. I'm not interested in being a firefighter." And they said, "No, you get to work on electronics, and you get to blow stuff up because you get to shoot. You're the guy who shoots the missiles and the big guns." And I went, "Yeah, sign me up. Sounds like I'm in." So,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's funny because you're right. I mean, back in those days, it's the military is interesting, and a lot of, or the Navy specifically, and back in those days was very interesting because yes, you had your assigned job, and yes, you had things that you did, but you always had other things that you were always multitasking, right? I spent a lot of time doing counter drug ops and interdiction, so boarding drug boats, doing things like that. I did. We were doing humanitarian stuff down in different places. So you were never just totally locked into doing what you came into the military to do. And I do think it's a great experience and a great way to um, build character, and what I liked about the schooling is the schooling taught you it was designed not to teach you to be an expert at, let's just say if it was software development, they weren't teaching you to be an expert at software development because the military forces a lot of education into you in a very short period of time. And what they really focus on is the hands-on part and critical thinking, right?
Mhm.
So it taught you how to troubleshoot. It taught you how to critically think. It taught you how to look at a problem, break that problem down, figure out where the problems are, and dial in and work on that. So I think that is one of the things that I think is the best thing about the military education that I got was it taught me how to think critically, and taught me to not to follow blindly what the book showed in a picture or schematic or a drawing, and sometimes you had to step back and take a look at it. And I do think in a lot of ways security is that way, right? And it goes kind of back to our, kind of sooner or later everything old is new again, right? Is the fact that if we're always have done it this way and we're still getting attacked, or we're still having issues, or we're still seeing the same risk out there, what do we need to change, right? It's that old saying that we've always done it this way is the most dangerous words in the world, especially to cybersecurity and IT. So you need to be able to critically think and step back and look at things and go, what if we do things a different way, or how do we mitigate this risk? How do we look at the program? How do we actually improve the process? Because a lot of times the technical part of what we do is fairly easy to solve. There's something out there that will technically do it. The harder part to change is the cultural aspect to it, or just the people set their ways and go, well, we're gonna change this process, and we're gonna look at it a different way. We're gonna change the way you work a little bit. And initially, you're going to get pushback, and people are going to be upset with you because you're changing the way that they work, and to them that makes their job harder. What you've got to get really good at is having that relationship and the ability to explain to them that you're actually trying to make their job eventually easier. Once they get used to the new process, we get the new process, these new controls, these new security controls in place, these new policies, these new standards. Just what it actually does is allow them to do their job with less risk, and eventually should allow them to move faster. But if you're not having those conversations up front and getting some buy-in at the front end, you're always going to be fighting this uphill battle. And that's why having the relationships with the business and your external partners, which are, typically your IT operation teams, your development teams, your infrastructure teams, and the business, if you're like us, we write a lot of software and we sell it to, we have customers logging into that. I need to be building a relationship with the business to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And we're not doing it to make it more difficult for them to sell. We actually should be doing it in a way that allows them to use us as a feature, as a benefit to using our product, because we're doing our job well and we know what we're doing and we're protecting it, and we're explaining it to them why we may be putting in MFA on a customer login. But realistically is, if you look at the breach, what breach just happened last week, PayPal just got breached, right? Credential stuffing, right, is one of those things that it's basically they've got a bunch of usernames and passwords, right? And they've gotten from other breaches, and they just hit a website and continue and hammer it with all these usernames and passwords till they get one that matches and logs them in. Well, if you just turn on MFA on PayPal, that defeats credential stuffing for the most part, right? But that's why the breach was fairly small. But you look at it like this, that goes there are people who are doing a couple of bad things. One, they're reusing passwords across multiple platforms, and two, they're not using MFA when MFA is available to them. And so there's a cultural user awareness problem that we have. And in general, that's a big part of our job is explaining, illuminating risk, explaining it to people in a way that they understanding, and show them a way to reduce that risk overall and keep it moving forward.
So how big of a breach is that going to affect other companies that are using PayPal? Because I honestly,
I think it was about, from what I saw, it was about 40,000 people, maybe a little under 40,000 people. And like I said, the problem is how many times have they reused that username and password on multiple applications across the board, right? There was a breach, 3 years ago, where they basically, that one breach that had that massive password dump that basically said everybody who's ever used the internet more or less has had their password exposed at the time, because it was in a big rainbow table basically out there. So the hackers have these massive rainbow tables. So if you're not putting things in place to defeat simple things like credential stuffing, or reusing passwords, or using more complex passwords. Ultimately, we want to get rid of passwords and move to some kind of passwordless environment. That I'm a firm believer that that's what we need to do, is get away from the passwords and use some kind of certificate. Use a technology that's certificate based and encryption. That's got the right levels of encryption and is at least resistant to being hacked. I do take it with a grain of salt that a lot of people out there are saying that they're unhackable because of the way they're designed. But I don't think there's anything unhackable. There's just stuff that takes a lot longer than anything else. And I mean, as the world moves, and we know that quantum computing and everything is out there in the conversation, that once it gets to be a little bit more common and it's not just a nation state thing, everything that we do today from an encryption and protection standpoint is no good anymore, right? It's going to be defeated. So we need to be thinking ahead on some of this stuff and figuring out ways to move into future-proof ourselves a little bit. But also, some of this is just basic good cyber hygiene. Some of this is the basic stuff like encryption, segmentation, good access control, least privilege, right? So if we're following things that we should have been doing for the last 20 years, you can mitigate a lot of this, and at least it gives you a little bit of time. I'm not going to say it's going to stop it, but it gives you a little bit of time to detect that somebody's in there doing something, because at a certain point they got to get loud, and once they get loud, that gives you the opportunity to stop them before they can exfiltrate anything, or make sure that what they exfiltrate is going to be really, really difficult for them to decrypt without some crazy horsepower.
Well, when you say your topic, sooner or later, everything old is new again. So I was thinking about a conversation I had with somebody in the financial industry, and they were just, his partner was going to start a new business. And I was like, well, do you really want to do that with our economy in the state? It is. And he's like, well, eventually rates are going to have to come down, and it's all, we'll come out of this and it'll just be a repeat circle. It'll be cyclical. And do you feel like, are you equating, sooner or later, everything old is going to be new again? Because that's kind of
like I was just talking about, right? Segmentation, least privilege, access control, process improvement. Well, guess what? That's been around for a long time, right? But we've got a new buzzword, Forrester or Gartner or somebody was kind enough to put a new buzzword around it for us. It's now called zero trust, right? So it's not new, right? And a lot of that I think is the thing is a lot of the stuff we see, it's not necessarily new. And I'm not saying there are not new attacks, right? There are new ATPs and things that come out, and new 0 days that come out that are an undiscovered vulnerability. But in a lot of cases, you look at how people are getting breached, how the attack path happened, what actually happened, that it comes down to some very common stuff. They're not patching. Most of the breaches, I forget it's probably been a couple of years ago. There was an article, one of the breach reports, one of the articles come out looking over at the breaches and said, 94% of all the breaches that had happened in the previous year were through an existing vulnerability that a patch was available for, right? People weren't patching. People are not keeping software up to date, right? They're getting through fairly easily. It's not like a lot of places are not getting some super advanced hack that's coming into them. They're actually getting compromised through known exploits that there are fixes for, and just bad practices, right? Having data exposed to the open internet that has weak passwords and no encryption on it, so it's easy to go in and download it, right? And it's easy to share that data. And you think back over time, this is stuff that if you look at all security training through the last 20 plus years, they're all telling you to protect the confidentiality, the integrity, right? They're all going through these things. You should be encrypting. You should be limiting access to it. You should be protecting it as well as you can. You should be keeping people away from it. So it's the same stuff over and over and over again. We're just really bad at implementing it. Because whatever new shiny toy that's hit the market, we run out and go, oh, well, this is the thing that's going to save us. When in reality, be better off spending money on doing some basic cyber hygiene stuff, getting a well-laid strategy out, and understanding risk. So I think the most exciting stuff I'm seeing coming down the pipe right now and it's still talking about risk, but there are companies out there that this is what they do, and happy to have discussions offline with that. I'm not making this a commercial for anybody, but looking at risk in a way that allows you to truly prioritize, measure it in near real time, look at it, get out of a point in time security or risk assessment, move into continuous monitoring, actually be able to group things, applications, and systems together, assign a risk appetite to them and a risk score to them, understand what the controls are and how they're actually implemented, and then be able to take a real look at this and go, are we focusing our limited resources, people and money? Are we focusing them on the right things? Or are we checking boxes to get past a bunch of compliance stuff that may or may not really move the needle? Now, granted, compliance is part of my job, right? We have to do it because there is a level of risk for non-compliance, but that goes into the overall risk measurement of the whole thing. Compliance is a piece of that. Regulatory compliance is a piece of it, right? But all the other controls and all looking at it holistically and what everything is that we're doing to protect that all goes into what the key risk indicators that you should be building and measuring for your unique situation. And you should be able to look at this holistically and go, have I done enough reasonably to protect this data on this application and the data that it holds? But maybe I haven't done enough over here, so maybe I need to shift focus over here. Maybe, and those are the things where you've got to look at it holistically and have a real hard look and look at things very seriously and go, are we doing everything we can with the resources that we currently have to protect what we do, and before we run out and buy the newest, latest, shiny thing that's being pitched to us is going to fix our problems.
There was an article, it was either in the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg. Somebody told me about it. I didn't read it, so I'm just going. They brought it up to me because, anytime cybersecurity, nobody really has anything to say about it until they read about it for those people that are not in the industry. And he was telling me that this article, I really wanted to go find it before I chatted with you, but he said that like 50% of people are starting to not pay ransom, and that the United States is starting to put more compliance, what compliance fees. I mean, are you seeing any of that happening? And do you believe that that's true? About 50% of people are not paying ransom.
Yeah, and I mean, that number is going to be really hard to chase down because there are so many small incidents that happen. That, across. I would say there's probably a small ransomware incident happening. It's probably one of those statistics that's probably happening every hour somewhere, and it may only be one or two laptops or something like that. And I'm sure that stuff's not getting reported, right? And I'm sure ransom's not getting paid on a lot of that stuff. The problem with that whole thing is it really is something that you have to be prepared for. You've had to have these discussions with the board and have to have a prepared plan, because I hate to do it, but it's a depends answer, right? Because there are compliance issues out there about paying ransom, especially to certain countries, certain places, right? But in reality, was it big enough to make it publicly reportable, right? And do I need to report it to anybody because maybe the number of records was small enough that I don't have to report it outside? And maybe I decided the best thing for me to do, because I can't recover this data and it's really impactful to the business, is to pay a ransom, right? Or, do I have a good BCP DR plan in place? Have I got immutable air-gapped backups in a place that I can say, you know what, go ahead, do, and the data is encrypted. You can have it. I'm just going to restore it. I've lost a little bit, but I'm not losing much. Now we get into the whole blackmail side of it. Was the data not encrypted? Is it going to be detrimental to you if they actually release that data? And there's still no guarantee. These are criminals. There's no guarantee they're going to give you the keys and they're going to give it back to you, right? They may have they may have destroyed your data in their encryption process because they didn't have a good encryption program, right? I've heard about that happening in a few places where they paid the ransom and they couldn't recover it anyway because the encryption tool that or encryption stuff that the bad guy had written, it destroyed the data. There was no recovery. So again, I think it's something you have to have a plan for. You have to talk openly about this and go, if this system had this happen to it, what are we going to do here? And you have to look on it I think you have to look at it at a system by system basis. And this is where getting into this whole data, having a good data governance program, or at least at least a way of knowing where your data is and how important it is, what the controls are you have around it, and do we understand from our applications which ones house that data, how are we connected to it, what are the attack vectors on it, have we done everything we can to limit this? And like I said, if I've got great encryption and they stole the data, I'm probably not going to be too concerned about it as long as I got a good backup, because the data isn't going to hurt me, right? Because it's encrypted and they can't do a whole lot with it. But if it's unencrypted data and they can expose maybe the company's IP, right, that was out there, and now it's going to be, I'm going to see a new, better knockoff from another country. Well, I'm not going to say better, but I'm going to see a new, cheaper knockoff from another country within the next few months. Maybe that's something I'm concerned about. But the truth is if it was for espionage, that kind of corporate espionage, and they're wanting to build a knockoff anyway, paying the ransom, you're just giving them more money and they're going to steal it anyway and make a copy of it. So that is something that I just don't have a good answer for it. You're going to have to have plans for each one of your systems and sensitive data on how you're going to approach that if and when it comes, right? The problem is there's a bigger chance of when it comes than if it comes.
Do you feel like the financial institutions are, do you think they're doing a better job as far as being safer? And one of the comparisons I want to, before you answer that, is on the personal side, I bank with a very, very large bank. On my business side, I bank with a business bank, and it's the business bank is amazing. The large bank, I never hear from. The business bank, all the time. I hear from them, all the time, and which is good because I feel pretty protected. The other side, the huge banks. So is it just the smaller ones have a lot more to lose than the larger banks?
Well, I don't think it's a lot more to lose. I think what you're seeing there is just volume of customers, right? It's hard to be personable with, when you get into the top 6 banks in the country, as many customers as they got, they're not going to be able. Do I think they do a better job than the industry average? They probably are on the higher side of the industry average because, and here's where here's where compliance and regulatory kind of helps, right? Because it is a driver. They are so highly regulated. They have so many, the fintech world, financial services world, the banking world, it is so highly regulated. You have so many people looking over your shoulder to see whether you're doing it right or not. And I think the assessors are getting better at bringing the right technical expertise. I'm starting to see that more with your outside big assessors. They're actually starting to bring in more and more people who actually understand cyber. I mean, 15 years ago, you brought in one of the big 4 to do an audit on you. We're doing one of our basic audits that we go through of some kind, whether it's a SOC 2 or a SOX. They were young people fresh out of college who probably had went to school to be a financial auditor. So they're or in that realm. So understanding IT and cybersecurity was not in their wheelhouse, and a lot of times you could baffle them with the jargon and the lingo a little bit and probably get away with some stuff. I think that day is going away a lot because I think people are realizing that as you see more and more teeth getting put into fines and the issues. Like as you see, just read the changes that NYDFS is trying to do to their their policy. Right, if you're doing business in New York, they are digging way deeper than they've ever dug. They're looking at controls. They're looking at things much closer. So you're getting a level of scrutiny outside of probably outside of federal government space that not many other industry gets that level of scrutiny from a cybersecurity standpoint. So my overall opinion is that most of the financial sector is doing a pretty good job because they have 50 people looking over their shoulder to verify that they're doing a good job. Doesn't mean they're perfect. It doesn't mean they're doing a great job across everything. Everybody who buys a new company, that is an area of risk for everybody when you start talking M&A, right? How good was your due diligence when you're looking at this? How fast were you connecting them in? Did you bring in risk that you didn't know about because you didn't have time because of the deal or something like that to get through the right level of due diligence? How far did you go down the rabbit hole? Did you just send them a questionnaire? And the truth is that's what happens a lot. That questionnaire game we all play with third-party risk and vendor risk which is, I won't say it's a complete waste of time, but it's something that it's a checkbox, and it's something that's fairly easy to game the system with, right? But I think eventually we're going to move to a world where to close a deal, you're going to have to allow the purchasing company probably to put something on your network that gives them telemetry and tells them and with great detail. Think of it as an automated pen test or automated risk review. Allows them to see what's actually going on in the environment, and then that's going to adjust what the final closing price is. I think we're going to get there eventually because you've got to have a great understanding of what's coming into your environment, and it's hard to do that with manual questionnaires and just manual people. You got to figure out a way to automate it.
Well, I'm totally shifting gears because I found this really interesting when you and a group of other people sat on a panel in Atlanta, and one of the hot topics that kind of got everyone riled up was not Twitter. Where'd I just go blank?
Was it TikTok?
TikTok. Thank you. I was just TikTok. So, and TikTok continues to explode.
It's not on my phone, and
I mean, now you have celebrities that are, it is crazy that it continues to just get bigger and bigger. So what are the vulnerabilities? Explain, especially for those that are listening to and Security for All side that tune into this show to learn more about cybersecurity. Tell us what those vulnerabilities are.
So the biggest problem is you've basically given them rights to everything you've given them access and the right to everything that's on your phone, right? If you go through, and I will say probably the best place to go see this, just if you don't want to have to read their T's and C's yourself, is it's funny, but I think Joe Rogan actually read their T's and C's on his podcast, and it is way too much access for what that platform is designed for, right? You are basically giving them access to every bit of the data on your phone, and you're agreeing to it by downloading and then setting up an account, right? It's had spyware in it before, and it is a Chinese-owned company, and it is sending data overseas, right? So you are sending a lot of personal data because we know everybody has the privacy nightmare that your phone is with all the data that's on it, as well as the financial nightmare probably that your phone would be if everything on it is accessed. It's just not worth the risk to me. It's not worth the risk to have that on my phone for something I'm number one. I'm just never going to do it. I'm not really built for TikTok, right? But it's
Do you have kids?
well, my kids are older, but
Okay.
none of my kids actually have it on their phones
They
either.
don't.
I mean,
Well,
my youngest is 20. She's in college,
and she doesn't have
and
TikTok.
she doesn't do the TikTok thing either. But I have been doing this for a while in the industry, so I think I've instilled a fair amount of paranoia in my family. Maybe not the same level of paranoia that I have, but it's you know,
Right.
I think I've got the appropriate level of paranoia instilled in them. So it's, and I think that's one thing why I do what we're doing right now, right? I, the best thing that I can do is get out and talk to people and let them know where some of this risk comes from. Think about things that I think about things that our peers think about. As I'm out talking with all of our peers in the cybersecurity world, and we're all having these problems and daily things, firefights that we're having to deal with. But as a community, we can learn from each other. We can get more people interested in it and get them into the industry, because we need more people who are concerned about this stuff and who want to get out and do a good job and want to have a good career path and want to do something that's interesting, that's going to make the world a better place. And I think cybersecurity is a great place to do that.
Well, and we've got about 3 minutes until we close, but you are just like the nicest guy ever. You talk to everyone, and I don't know how you do everything that you do, and you still have room for. We talk all the time about how do vendors get in front of CISOs. It seems like you are always open to talking
So
to people. I met you on LinkedIn.
yeah,
You're just when you were with Data, the first company before
first data, yeah, it's
First
probably
Data, that I met you on
back,
LinkedIn, and
yeah.
you take the time to talk to people. How do you do it all?
So some of it's time management. A lot of it is I don't sleep a whole lot, I guess, too. But I I also, some of this is I'm reading stuff constantly, so I'm trying to pay attention to news feeds. I'm trying to pay attention to articles that are coming out. It's the world we live in. I got to keep up to speed, right? Like, I just was watching the news feeds before we got on here, and I mean, I see that this LastPass breach that happened they're now admitting it's much worse than what they first admitted, right? So it's just trying to stay in front of what's coming at me, because I have to be prepared to shift what we are doing as a company in case there's something new coming, right? And I think talking with folks who are in different verticals, in different industries, who have different size companies, and even when we get into the startup world, looking at what's coming out, going, it's always worth having the conversation. I think the biggest thing is like you've heard me say before, we owe it to each other to have a transparent conversation. You may pitch me something that's interesting to me, but I may not be ready to look at it. I may not have time for it. I'm going to do that. And it takes me 2 seconds out of my day to tell somebody, great, I, I think it'll look at it, or it's not for me right now. Now, I will say that my LinkedIn has gotten to the point where it is a little difficult for me to keep up with everybody who messages me every day wanting me to look at their product. And I'm also not a fan of I'm connecting with you, and then I would like to have a 15-minute meeting with you
Yeah.
right after this to tell me that. That's not the way to do it. Send me over some information, let me look at it, and if I'm interested in it, I'll get back to you. I'm more apt to connect with folks who are practitioners, who are looking for some advice, mentorship, or just wanting to know what they can do. I will answer those almost always.
Well, that is awesome. And this time flew by. I knew it would. Ken Foster, who's the VP of IT Governance at Fleet Corps, thank you so much for being on the show. And if anyone out there, a lot of people listen to this show after it airs. We're going to be out at RSA, and I think it's like April 26th, and Ken's going to be there, and we're going to do a big bourbon tasting. So more information to come on that. Thank you so much, Ken. You're such a role model for the industry. Thanks for being on the show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will catch you all next week. Stay safe, stay secure, and until next week, have a great rest of your day.